This is the Rebound Rundown. I'm your host, Paul Fritchner. Your home for college basketball in the Cincinnati area and across the country every Monday through Friday during the season. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Great to be joined today by Rick Broering, the publisher of MusketeerReport.com and NKU's radio analyst. Rick, I was sitting here the other day looking at this and realizing how long it's been since you've been on the rundown, and time flies with the college basketball season. The calendar's already flipped to February, and I feel like it's been forever since you've been on the show. So first of all, thanks for being here. And second, we got a lot to get to today. We're going to start with Xavier, and then we're going to get to NKU. We'll start with the Musketeers, who, as everybody is listening to this right now, has Connecticut tonight. Xavier's, it's been a roller coaster of a Big East season. Where do you think Xavier sits right now after a buzzer beater of a win against DePaul on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fun part about a game like that is the pressure is off this team already, and the pressure is off this fan base. You know, like, I know ideally it wouldn't be that way, but they're probably not playing for an at-large bid at this point or anything like that. You want to see them make improvement. You want to see them be a dangerous team when they get to the Big East tournament, and maybe they can create some magic there. But a win like that, when you don't know how many more are left on the schedule, that's pretty fun to experience as a fan. I think that game went from so unenjoyable and so frustrating to watch for fans to the way it ended, which was great, that it was just a nice sort of breakup from the struggles of this team and the lack of success they've had recently, to see one go down for them, both the shot and actually get a close win to fall their way one time. That was uplifting, I think, not just for the team, but for the fan base. Yeah,
I think you said it exactly, right? I mean, there have been so many close games in the last couple of years that haven't gone Xavier's way, that to finally come back from down 18 in the second half to win that game was pretty incredible. But the follow-up question to that, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit, was, if you're Xavier and you're not going to make the NCAA tournament this year unless you win the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden, if you're a Xavier fan listening to this right now, what are you looking for over the last month of the season?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a brand new coaching staff still, right? So I think each game is another piece of evidence of, how do we feel about this stuff? How do we feel about our system? How do we feel about the way they're changing things up? Which, in my opinion, is the most exciting part if you're a Xavier fan. Like, the amount of legitimate, quote-unquote, adjustments that this staff has made from a basketball perspective, being willing to change what they're doing on the fly, whether that means completely changing up their personnel mid-game because it's not working for them last time against UConn. And sure, that didn't work. They lost that game by 23 points, but they went to an all-small lineup with no centers in that game for decent stretches against UConn last time because they couldn't handle Terrace Reed. It's like, all right, let's make him handle us then. And Terrace Reed came out of the game for a decent stretch there. And, you know, again, not all these things are working, but I just think it's fun to see the amount of things they're willing to do and the amount of them that have actually worked to give this team a better chance at winning some of these games, or give them a comeback in a second half and make a game close, or whatever the case may be. And in this DePaul game, it ended up finally working out in their favor in the long run.
Yeah, and so now here you are with, 9-10 regular season games left and a really difficult stretch. Connecticut tonight, St. John's next Monday at Madison Square Garden. Tonight's your most difficult game of the season. Xavier's, they opened as an 18.5-point underdog tonight. I did not preview this game tonight against UConn in the early portion of the show because I knew we'd talk about it here. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go listen to the audio show on Apple or Spotify, wherever you want to get your podcasts. You have any thoughts on this game tonight, Rick? I know Xavier's a massive underdog, but anything to watch for tonight?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about the Xavier team is they have been unpredictable at times, right? Like, they have been able to put forth some improbable performances, whether they've been wins or just good games where they've played a team that you didn't expect them to play tough. I maybe that'll be the case here, but watching the first game between these two teams, there's not a lot of hope to go on. I mean, it just felt like Xavier couldn't really stop anything UConn wanted to do on the offensive end. They got so many paint touches early in that game, whether they were driving the ball or throwing it into their big man, Terrace Reed, who Xavier couldn't guard at all, that it became a game. It looked like they were just raining threes on them and just shooting threes and knocking down shots, but it really was a lack of Xavier's lack of ability to keep them in front and keep them out of the paint, because they were just playing inside out and kicking to wide open shooters. And when they were running set plays for their shooters, Xavier could not fight through their screens, could not handle their misdirection schemes that they run. And their best shooters were running wide open for threes on the wing, threes at the top of the key. If you can't solve that, it's going to be impossible to have a chance in this game. And even if you can solve that, it's still going to be really hard, because UConn is more talented. They're bigger. They're more athletic at every position. They've just got a really good team. So it's going to have to be one of those performances where Xavier plays above their level.
Yeah, and then next week at St. John's, we just saw Xavier and St. John's play last weekend, and Xavier took St. John's right down to the wire. Quite honestly, they tell you they should have won that game, up by double digits in the second half. St. John's comes back and wins it. St. John's is great. I think they're better than the national narrative has been surrounding them, but they're not invincible. You and I probably won't talk here on the Rebound Rundown before next Monday's game. Any thoughts on that one, going to Madison Square Garden and having to play them again so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, again, you don't like Xavier's chances in that game. Obviously, St. John's is going to be a pretty heavy favorite at home, but I do view that game completely differently than I viewed the UConn rematch. The UConn game feels like you really need a natural disaster or something for you to have a chance in that game. The St. John's game, we solved for a long stretch of that game. Xavier had them on the ropes. I mean, they were running and playing with them. St. John's has these stretches where they're just not all that dialed in. Their lack of skill shows up at times. They get pretty sloppy. So they've definitely had inconsistencies and bad stretches throughout their season. And if you catch them in one of those for, a 10-minute stretch or so, you've got a chance at them. Now, do I like Xavier's chances on the road of handling that physicality based on what we saw late in the first matchup? Probably not, but that game feels much more like you have a chance than the UConn game does.
Rick, what do you think has been the most disappointing thing about Xavier here in Big East play?
I mean, I guess we kind of already knew it going into Big East play. Maybe you were just holding on to hope that someone would get it going, Pop would continue to develop more, or Anthony Robinson would have a miracle midseason and it finally start clicking for him. But just the total lack of post play. I mean, it feels like in most games, you're just at such a disadvantage. No matter how well Jovan Milicevic plays on the offensive end, he's just not cut out to guard legitimate centers in the Big East. I actually think they've done a good job of overcoming that and making up for it and not getting exploited too much in the interior. But when push comes to shove, like we saw at the end of that St. John's game, it just feels like Xavier doesn't have any legitimate post presence that they can rely on to get rebounds, get stops on the defensive end. And I think that's, when you're watching the team, to me, that's the part that really stands out as like, that's just frustrating and hard to watch, especially knowing that they did go out and try to get, like a high dollar, high major transfer at the center spot. And it just unfortunately didn't pan out at all. Yeah.
All right. We'll talk more closer to the end of the season. There's plenty more, I'm sure, when we're talking about, players returning, players that I'm assuming will hit the portal, all of that. But is there anything we haven't mentioned here that's at the top of your mind, or things you're watching, or anything Xavier related before we move to NKU that we haven't already talked about here on the show?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much it matters. He's at the end of his career, so it's not like you're looking forward to keeping him potentially, but I'm really interested in seeing what Malik Messina Moore does the rest of the way. He's just been so back and forth once he got it going a little bit there in Big East play, where some nights he shows up and he looks like he is a legitimate top player in the Big East and could be a real piece for this team. And then other nights, it's just, there's no juice, and I'd like to see him maybe show some more consistency. I'm not sure how confident I am in that happening, but that I think is kind of the storyline that I'm most interested from a personnel standpoint right now with this team, is like, what are you going to get out of Malik Messina Moore from night to night?
Sure. All right, let's move on to your Northern Kentucky Norse, who have been on a slide lately. They've been really banged up, and listening to Darren Horn talk with yourself and with Jim Kelch after the game on your post-game radio show, you can tell there was some optimism against Oakland, right? I mean, you were right there with 10 minutes left. You're down by 1 before Oakland pulls away. In this losing streak, there have been winnable opportunities that just haven't gone NKU's way, to where it's not like the whole season has completely fallen apart. But the problem is right now, you've really done a disservice to yourself with seeding for the Horizon League tournament, which obviously is everything that this season culminates to. Where is NKU right now, Rick, and how can they correct things going forward?
Yeah, they're in a bit of a slide, and this weekend was difficult because you go to Detroit and you just don't play well at all, and you're a little bit shorthanded without Ethan Elliott, and Donovan Rakotananahari wasn't really himself for that game, even though he played some minutes, and then LJ got hurt in that one. LJ Wells did. Oakland, I think what you saw from Darren Horn, what you heard from Darren Horn after that game was an appreciation for the way his team fought. They were undermanned. They weren't as talented as Oakland without LJ Wells, without Ethan Elliott, without Donovan Rakotananahari, and they showed up to fight. They challenged shots at the rim. They tried to play physical as much as they could. They still got beat up on second chance points a little bit and some interior scoring, but overall, I think he appreciated that effort that they gave. And so now the question becomes, Paul, it was really about getting a top 3 seed in the Horizon League for the tournament because there's such an advantage there now with the way that they've changed the Horizon League setup. It has a standalone game with the lowest seeds still in the tournament, making the trek to Indy on Sunday night. It'd be in line. It's in line for the 4 and the 5 seed, assuming everything goes to chalk. So you really like to be a top 3 seed to avoid that extra Sunday night game before the semifinals, that play-in game, if you will. So that it was try to get a top 3 seed originally. Now, as the losses continue to mount, they still have a chance to get a top 3 seed. But now you're starting to look and you're saying, hey, you need to avoid not going on the road in the opening round of the Horizon League tournament. You've got to get a top 5 seed now to avoid that. And that's very much in question now for the Norse if they don't start winning these games. Now, one thing we talked about with Richard Skinner on the Skinny podcast is they have a winnable path ahead of them. They played a lot of their tougher games on the road early in Horizon League play. They've got a lot of home games, and the more difficult games on their schedule are at home, the back end of Horizon League play. So I think that's the big thing for this team. The reason for optimism, if you're a fan, is if they can get healthy, they can find a little bit of a rhythm, and maybe, just maybe, Cale Robinson got it going again in Oakland when he hit 4 3-pointers after that incredible slump that he was in for about a 5 or 6 game stretch there. Him coming back to life, gets going. Maybe this team gets it rolling and takes advantage of an easier schedule down the stretch.
Yeah, it was funny. I was listening to the Skinny podcast today that you did with Richard Skinner from last week, and I had talked about, I think it was on the show yesterday, or maybe it was the weekend preview show last weekend, where NKU does have some winnable games here in the month of February, to where I believe they only have 7 regular season games left, but it's not the most challenging set of games. And because of that, you feel like, okay, well, maybe you get some guys healthy. You can kind of start to wind your way back to the top of the standings. But, when guys are hurt, it obviously becomes more difficult. If Green Bay this week, give us your thoughts on this upcoming game against Green Bay on Wednesday night.
That's a game where I would think, and now maybe they're going to be shorthanded and that'll make it feel a little bit different, but I would think that this NKU team is going to come out ready to play against Green Bay. They got smacked in the mouth up at Green Bay, fell behind by 15 points early, clawed back, and had multiple chances down the stretch to hit a game winner to take that game over and win it, and just couldn't come up with the shot, couldn't get one to go down. I think all of them left that game with a bitter taste in their mouth, thinking, we should have won that one. Those guys aren't better than us. Green Bay has definitely been struggling since that win and that little stretch that they had at success there. So I expect this to be a game where NKU really comes ready to play and puts forth one of their better efforts.
All right, Rick, I appreciate you always joining the Rebound Rundown. And here, as we get into February, I'll have you on a couple more times, hopefully before March gets going. But any deals, anything on the Musketeer report, or anything else you got a promo here before we get out?
Yeah. If you're listening to this on the day that it's released, I think we're still running our 50% off annual subscription deal, or 2 for 1 when you sign up for your first time. So check that out, musketeerreport.com. The portal's about to hit, Paul, and that's where really we all get busy.
Is there still the Paramount deal with that?
Yeah, after you're off a promotional price, if you're paying full price for it, you get Paramount Plus with your subscription to any 24/7 site. So that's a big perk. If you're going to sign up for Paramount Plus, you might as well go ahead and get your Xavier Insider coverage as well.
That's right. All right, Rick, appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.